I found out they married without me. What I did next changed their lives forever. I sat alone in my kitchen on a Saturday afternoon, still wearing my church clothes, when I saw the photograph on my neighbor's phone. My own son, standing at an altar, in a tuxedo I never helped him pick out, marrying a woman I had never met. And not one single person in that family had thought to tell me it was happening. My name is Victoria. I am 69 years old, and before I tell you what I did next, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now, because where this story goes, you are not going to want to miss a second of it. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because I have more stories like this one, and I share them because I think somebody out there needs to hear them. And type in the comments below where you are watching this from tonight. I read every single one, and I love knowing how far these words travel. Now let me tell you what happened to me. I raised my son alone. His father left when the boy was 4 years old, and I never once complained about it, not to him, not to anyone. I worked 2 jobs for years, days at an insurance office downtown, evenings cleaning offices after everyone else had gone home, so that he could have new shoes every fall and never once feel like we were behind. I skipped meals some weeks so he wouldn't have to skip his. I sat up nights helping him with homework I barely understood myself, just so he'd have someone in the room with him. That boy was my whole world, and for 30-some years I believed I was his. Somewhere along the way that changed, and I didn't see it happening until it was already done. Started small, the way these things always do. He stopped calling on Sundays like he used to. Then the calls became texts, short ones, always with some excuse about work or traffic or being tired. I told myself that's just how it is when children grow up and build their own lives. I told myself not to be one of those clingy mothers who makes her son feel guilty for living his life. So I stayed quiet. I waited. I told myself patience was a virtue, and that he would come back around when he was ready. What I didn't know was that he had met someone. A woman from a wealthy family, the kind of family with a lake house and a driver and dinner parties where they discuss. I want you to understand something. I wasn't upset because I wasn't invited to a party. I have been to plenty of parties in my life, and I can live without another one. I was gutted because I realized, staring at that photograph, that I had been erased. Quietly. Deliberately. Someone had decided that I did not belong in the story of my own son's life anymore. And nobody had even given me the courtesy of telling me to my face. I called him that night. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady. When he picked up, I asked him plainly, "Did you get married?" There was a long pause, the kind of pause that tells you everything before the words even arrive. And then he said, "Mom, it's complicated. Her family wanted something small, close friends only, and things just moved fast, and I meant to call you, I really did. Close friends only." As if I had somehow drifted, over the course of 34 years, from being his mother to being a distant acquaintance he'd meant to get around to calling. I didn't yell. I want you to know that. I have never been a woman who yells. I simply said I understand, and I hung up the phone, and then I sat in my kitchen in the dark for a very long time. Here is where most people expect me to tell you I cried myself to sleep and let it go, because that's what women my age are supposed to do. Swallow it, forgive it, tell ourselves that children have their own lives to live and we should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention they toss our way. And for about 2 weeks, that's almost exactly what I did. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself to let it go. But then something else happened, something that changed the whole shape of this story. My son called me 3 weeks after the wedding. Not to check on me. Not to apologize properly, though he did mumble something about being really sorry about the timing. He called because his new wife's family had an accountant, and the accountant had asked some questions about my house. You see, when my late husband and I bought our home 41 years ago, we bought it outright, no mortgage, paid in full with money we scraped together over a decade of sacrifice. Over the years, that little 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood that used to be modest became worth an enormous amount of money, because the city grew up around it and suddenly everyone wanted to. He asked me very casually, very smoothly, whether I had thought about updating my will. He said it like it was nothing, like it was just a friendly suggestion between a son and his aging mother. But I have lived 69 years on this earth, and I know exactly what it sounds like when someone is fishing for information about what they stand to inherit. That was the moment something in me went very still and very clear. I want to be honest with you. In that moment, I didn't feel rage the way you might expect. I felt something colder than that. I felt like a woman waking up from a very long, very comfortable dream. For 34 years I had given that boy everything I had. My money, my time, my youth, my patience, my forgiveness for every small slight along the way. And the moment he had a family that looked better on paper than the one who actually raised him, I had become an afterthought, valuable only for what I might leave behind when I died. So I decided quietly, without telling a single soul, that I was going to find out exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. And then I was going to make sure they understood, in a way they could never misunderstand, exactly what they had thrown away. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ellen who had handled my late husband's estate all those years ago, and who I trusted completely. I told her everything: the wedding, the phone call, the question about my will. She listened without interrupting, the way good lawyers do, and when I finished she asked me one simple question: Victoria, what do you actually want to happen here? I sat with that question for a long time. I didn't want to destroy my son. Despite everything, he was still the little boy who used to fall asleep against my shoulder on the bus ride home from the grocery store because we couldn't afford a car. But I also refused, absolutely refused, to spend the rest of my life being treated like a line item on someone else's balance sheet. I wanted him to understand, in a way he couldn't ignore, that love isn't something you get to collect on later like an inheritance. It's something you have to show up for every single day, and he had stopped showing up a long time before that wedding ever happened. So Ellen and I built a plan. The first thing we did was restructure my estate entirely. Instead of leaving the house and my savings directly to my son, the way my old will had specified, we moved everything into a carefully structured trust. The house, the retirement accounts, everything I had spent a lifetime building, all of it went into that trust with very specific conditions attached. My son would receive nothing outright. Instead, the trust would only release funds for specific, verifiable purposes: medical needs, education for any children he might have, and a modest quarterly distribution that would continue only as long as he maintained a real relationship with me, verified not by some vague promise but by actual, documented time spent together. Regular visits. Real conversations. Not obligatory phone calls squeezed in between other priorities. The second thing I did was quietly reach out to his new wife. I want to be clear, I did this with grace, not with anger. I invited her to lunch, just the two of us, at a modest little cafe near my home, nothing fancy, because I wanted to see how she'd react to modest. She came dressed beautifully, polite in that practice way people are polite when they're trying to make a good impression on someone they've already decided doesn't matter much. Over lunch, I asked her gently why the wedding had been kept from me. She gave me some version of the same story my son had given. It was small, it moved fast, close friends only. I let her finish. And then I asked her, just as gently, whether she knew that her new husband's mother had spent decades working 2 jobs, so he could have the life that eventually led him to her family's dinner table. She didn't have an answer for that. I didn't need her to. I simply wanted her to understand that the woman she'd excluded from her wedding wasn't some minor character in her husband's life. I was the entire foundation it was built on. The third thing I did was the one that truly changed everything. I began spending time, real time, with my late husband's side of the family, cousins, nieces, a great-nephew studying to be a teacher who I'd always adored but rarely saw. I started hosting Sunday dinners again, the way I used to when my son was young, except now the table was filled with people who showed up simply because they wanted to be there, not because they were angling for anything. Word of this got back to my son the way these things always do in families. He heard that his mother was thriving, that her home was full of laughter again, that she seemed, for the first time in years, genuinely happy. And slowly something shifted in him. Took months. I won't pretend it happened overnight because real change never does. But eventually, my son showed up at my door on an ordinary Tuesday evening, without his wife, without an agenda, just him, looking smaller and more uncertain than I'd seen him look since he was a teenager. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd once helped him with homework, and he finally said the words I'd been waiting years to hear. He told me he was ashamed. He told me that somewhere along the way, he'd let his new family convince him that moving forward meant leaving me behind, and that he saw now how wrong that was. He told me he missed his mother. I didn't hand him back the keys to everything right away. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild itself just because someone finally says the right words. But I did let him back into my life slowly, on my terms this time, not his. We started having dinner together, just the two of us, every other Sunday. He started calling, really calling, not texting, just to talk with no hidden agenda about houses or wills or inheritances. Eventually, his wife joined us too, and I found to my surprise that underneath all that polish, she was a woman who'd simply been taught the wrong things about what family was supposed to look like. We're not close, not the way I am with my son, but we're civil, and we're honest with each other now, which is more than we had before. The trust still stands, by the way. I never dismantled it. My son knows that whatever I leave behind will only ever go to people who showed up for me while I was alive, not people who simply waited for me to die. And I think, honestly, that's the healthiest thing that ever happened to our relationship, because for the first time in years, he isn't in my life because of what he might get from me. He's in my life because he chooses every single week to actually be there. I think about that wedding photograph sometimes, the one Carol showed me over the fence that Saturday afternoon. At the time, it felt like the end of everything I'd built with my son. Looking back now, I understand it was actually the beginning of something better. A relationship built on honesty instead of obligation, on presence instead of assumption. Cost me a great deal of pain to get there. But I wouldn't trade what I have now, imperfect as it is, for the polite fiction we were living in before. If you are watching this and you have ever felt erased from your own family's story, quietly pushed aside while everyone assumes you'll always just be there when it's convenient, I want you to hear this from a woman who has lived it. You are not obligated to keep giving endlessly to people who have stopped showing up for you. Love your children, love your family, but never confuse being taken for granted with being needed. Set your boundaries. Protect your peace. And trust me when I tell you, it is never too late at any age to teach the people around you how you deserve to be treated. If this story meant something to you, please give it a like, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every single comment, and I love hearing from all of you. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and never let anyone make you feel small in the story of your own life.